Good evening. I am Melissa McGinley, the dramaturg for Henry IV Part 1 here at OrangeMite, and I am here with the female cast of the show. So why don't we start going around with by introducing everyone and who they play.
Okay, I'm Kristen Fraser. I play the Traveler and the Sheriff.
I'm Felicia Williams. I play Mistress Quickly.
I'm Megan Gardrick. I play Northumberland and Bardolph.
So as I said before, I'm Melissa McGinley, and I also play Lady Mortimer.
I'm Caitlin Fowler, and I play Lady Kate Percy.
I'm Lydia Sanderson, and I play Poins and John of Lancaster.
I'm Anna Fraser, and I play Pato.
I'm Irene Winters. I play Worcester.
So we have 8 women, and only 3 of them actually play female characters. So for a moment, let's start by discussing the women who play men in this show. How do you feel? What has been interesting and or challenging in having to play a character of a different gender to your own?
I think the way that men carry themselves and walk is different than women.
Yeah.
So I know that I have to make sure, and I feel like I'm watching people in the grocery store walking. All right, okay, they stand up a lot straighter than I do, and they do not swing their hips.
Yeah, also how they stand, because I'll put my hands on my hips and I'm like, is this correct?
Yeah. Can I do that?
I cross my arms when I don't know what to do with them when I'm playing a male character because I'm like, do something that is very obviously feminine. You know?
Yeah, I'll watch my brothers and I'll be like, right down. Cross his arms a lot.
Study the animals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Man, and it's natural habitat.
it's natural habitat.
You just sit right now in the grocery store.
Stalking people.
Hiding in the shelf.
She takes a box of cereal
Wearing camouflage, nobody can see me.
Casual activity.
So do you find then when you're crafting a male character that you're focusing on essentially gendered behaviors, or do you try to look past that to the characteristics of the character to see how they would play out?
I try to look past it, but it definitely plays into it a bit, because it's definitely different trying to figure out how a male would act in certain situations, but you also need to pull in their personality of, just the way you would play that type of personality,
It's like playing any character, really. You have to look in depth into what their habits are and what they're like, and then
Transfer that over
into what you're doing with your body and with your actions.
Yeah, well, the first ever play I've ever done was a Shakespeare play where I played a man. So I was coached into that behavior. So I don't really think of how to act. It's more about the character's personalities.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, as a woman who has a job that is a woman working in a man's world, often as an attorney, and especially when I was an assistant district attorney, you're working with police officers, and it's a very male-dominated world. I just kind of got used to carrying myself in such a way in a man's world that I don't even think about it. You just, who's this character? What are we doing? And let's go. So.
I think Shakespeare too kind of sets it up that when you look at the character and you look at how they talk and kind of like Lydia and Anna said, their habits and what they do, it can help you think about their male persona. So Bardolph is a drunk and Bardolph is lewd and not respectful, and you can kind of think of men in your life or men in the scene and you're like, oh, that's that guy. That's the Bardolph.
All those times you swiped.
I know, all the times I swiped right, exactly.
And also Poins and Hal are basically college guys.
Frat bros.
Yeah, frat bros. So my brother's in the fraternity, so I'm just teach me your way.
Does anybody have a character who is not just a male, but a super masculine character?
I feel like Worcester kind of is.
Yeah, because there is a difference between a woman playing a man and I'm specifically playing a male part. It's very important he's male.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I play John of Lancaster, I find myself deepening my voice just because like he's supposed to be very responsible and like I don't know, he's like more masculine because like he fights like sword fights and stuff like that. So like I feel like I become more masculine in that role than
I think that too, like because I play two men, Northumberland is more like royal and more like high status, so his body's carriage is different, which I would have done even if I was playing a woman in that same status, so I kind of think of it that way. But I also have to kneel as a man, and that's weird because I don't kneel down like that in front of like a king. So like, okay, how would a guy do like how?
A different center of gravity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm like I'm gonna fall forward. Yeah, so that's another thing I think about too. But I also played, I was King Richard in King Richard II. So like I played another man who was not very masculine. He's a very feminine guy. So these two characters are vastly different than King Richard was. So it's interesting to compare them.
So for the women who play women in this play, how do you find navigating the female presence in this world full of men? Because there are so many characters in this play, and only 3 of them are women, and they're vastly different from each other, all 3 of them. Do you want to?
Sure. Well, Mistress Quickly is kind of like feisty and out there, so like I feel like. I don't really know all of Shakespeare's plays and stuff, but I feel like out of all the women characters in Shakespeare, she's one of the most like confident ones, I would say, and more like outspoken. You don't really see a ton of that, especially like in part 1 and 2. But I just feel like
She has her own mind. Yeah.
yes. Did
Yeah.
not know the words.
Yeah.
It's funny hearing you say that. I don't think I realized until just now, but all 3 women we see in this play are actually very strong women. And not as much with Lady Mortimer. She says she'll be a soldier, but both of us use violence to get what we want. Just funny. The women in this play will maybe jump to violence a little faster than the men, though. But all of these women in this play are very strong, which is really, really cool. So it doesn't feel like we're like a side piece in any way.
Right.
Though I mean, it is different for you because like you're on stage with like 6-7 male characters at a time. So that's a very different energy. But it's like we're here with our husbands. Hello. Yeah, like when Ryan was in rehearsal the other night, I was like, cool. So why am I here? Because literally the only person in the entire show I talk to is my husband. Even in scenes with groups of people, the only person I speak to is my husband.
Yes, but your husband can understand what you're saying.
I speak the same languages.
My character doesn't speak English.
What is that thing Ursula says? You gotta use the body language.
Oh my goodness. I also think it's interesting in this play how the women play off each other, especially, and how they fit. Like Lady Mortimer and Lady Percy are very much, even though they are very similar in ways, they're very much foils to each other.
Yeah.
And that they're two, like the Percys and the Mortimers are two very different illustrations of marriage.
Which is funny because if you think about it, the fact that because Mortimer is Kate's brother, so we grew up together, and then he ends up with a woman who's also a fighter, also going to kind of come at him. So it's one of those things, which is sort of like this idea of, and if he's grown up with somebody who's not going to take any of his crap, it makes sense he married someone who's not going to take it.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's sort of the men grow up with strong women in this play. We never see somebody who's going to falter.
Yeah, there's no weeping flower.
Yeah, which is nice because given how few of us there are, there's about 3% of the dialogue in this play is said by women. It's really nice that we are present. We're not hiding in the corner. We're not just there to be there. When a woman is on stage, she's on stage.
Sometimes wielding a sword. Women who fight with swords. How's that?
Yeah.
Especially having women as fight choreographers.
You fight a lot.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Really, the only one of us here that does.
Well, like I said, I started my acting career in Shakespeare. I started with the summer camps, and the first 2 plays I did, just one. I fought in when I played Benvolio in Romeo and Juliet. I had choreography, but since then I haven't really done anything until now, and it's really fun.
It's
fun to fight with the guys sometimes. We had a sword and like, there you go, have fun. I'm trying to think now.
I know.
Oh, actually, there's one thing I was thinking about as we got ready for this. Even though the women are incredibly strong, there are some moments when you're like, oh, that's a very feminine thing to do. So my first line in the show, which is this giant speech, but one of the very first things I said is, for what offense have I this fortnight been a banished woman from my Harry's bed? So I automatically assume it's my fault. And that's something which is really odd. Like later on in the speech, she's like, okay, what did you do, Harry? But she starts off like, hey, did I mess up? And that's her introduction to the show. And I don't think I really realized that till now. Like, she walks in like, did I do something wrong? How do I fix this, sweetie? And then by the end of the thing, she's about to break his arm. But other than that, it's fine.
With that nice little, if you don't love me, I will not love myself.
Yeah. She has some moments where it's like, okay, pull it together. But it's, yeah. And there are some moments where it's definitely the sad female we see in so many of Shakespeare's plays. It's moments most of the time.
What was interesting for us when we crafted Lady Mortimer, because in this case we actually do get to craft her, because if you go back and you look at the folios and the quartos and all of the original source material that we have for this play, it just says in italics underneath the other lines, the lady speaks in Welsh. Or when Glendower speaks to her, it says, he replies in Welsh. So there's no real choice of what it is. And Welsh was a fairly common language in London at the time. There were a lot of Welsh people, and marriages between Welsh women and Englishmen who could not understand each other were not terribly uncommon. So it was not out of place on the stage for the audience at that time. And when the transcriber took it down, they were probably like, I got nothing. She speaks in Welsh.
Words occur.
But it gave us a really interesting opportunity to decide what we wanted to do, because in my research as dramaturg, we found that apparently, I read somewhere that there was a production that the RSC did in 1964, and they consider that their standardized Welsh dialogue.
Oh.
But, and I could not find that anywhere, because I looked for it. But other than that, what song you use and what she says are literally up to the staff and how they decide they want to craft her as a character.
Yeah, I think it was cool too. Like I was in on that like meeting and like knowing that like as a production background person, I don't know what she says. So like the conversation that she has with everyone else is intimate and isolated. We don't know what she says, and I think it's kind of interesting that we don't, like, none of us here know the translation. So it's kind of interesting. You're like, oh my gosh, what is she saying?
We did tell the actor who plays Glendower.
Yeah.
You should understand me and know what I'm saying.
Right, yeah, he's your dad.
So.
But I think it was cool too, like when we thought about the song, like did we want it to be a battle hymn, like she's singing him into battle, or did we want it to be like a lullaby, like she feels like she's singing him to sleep one last time. So it's kind of cool, like we got to make her who we just, envisioned in our mind just fit into the play with the other women that are with her.
And we chose a traditional Welsh song called Dacu Hariad, which translates to There is my beloved. And then the last verse of it, you can find translations for this anywhere, so I'm not spoiling anything, but the last verse of the song is there is the harp and there are the strings, but what am I worth with no one to play for? It's very
It's weird though, because we don't understand anything you ever say, and that is a source of humor. But there's like maybe 2 lines your father translates, and one is like she's desperate, and the other is she's gonna dress up as a soldier and follow you to war. That's like the one line he translates. Yeah. And then we get like this like soft feminine lullaby. So it's a very well-rounded character, even though we have no clue what you're saying.
Yeah. We tried. I didn't think I was going to be the one playing it, so I tried to make something.
Says the woman who speaks Welsh.
I can teach other people to speak Welsh.
Yeah, I think the fact that we can't understand you makes it a lot more like real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and especially like the people who are on stage with you at the same time that you're speaking and don't know what you're saying. It's easier to read.
Also, there's a purity to that relationship, and the way that like so many of the characters in this play are constantly fighting or lying or making something of themselves. Whereas since you guys can't understand each other, it's really all for God. It's just each other.
What's the point of lying when it's
It's a very pure, sweet relationship. It's not really tainted in any way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like your relationship, like you and your husband is like, they're like, we call them the furniture breakers, like the people that are like yelling at each other and throwing furniture and then like making out 5 minutes later. So it's just interesting because we see you on the stage. We have like more of a, we see you more. We have that like really big, long scene with you guys, and you get to see that like the roller coaster ride that you guys are on, just like a snippet of your relationship. And it's interesting, like we get an even smaller snippet of yours, but we can tell in that small snippet that you are you guys are complete opposites.
Oh yeah.
The Mortimers are not breaking furniture.
Yeah. And it's really odd because if you think about it, you are in one scene and I am in two. And I think probably the Hotspurs are like the main couple of the show, but you guys have like the romance. We have a passion. Let's go. And it's a good word. It's good. Yeah, and it's one of those things which is like normally in a show you're like, oh yeah, you know, like I'm part of the main couple, so you're like in like 15, 20 scenes. No, we show up twice, and then we're gone. That's it. That's all you get from these two women.
Yeah.
She's quickly around a lot more, and she's there, and she's like an active part of the group. But the feminine role of wife appears twice.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting statement too on the war aspect of the play. Like a big part of war is separating families, and I think we and our characters show that we're the cost of the war.
And we also fight very hard to not be separated. Our husbands are like, we gotta go now. And we're like, hold on, what? No. So that's what
I think it's interesting because we know that Mr. Skullkilly has a husband because,
No,
but
we
he's
don't
never in
understand.
the show. And your character's in Merry Wives, and he's not in that show either. So it's kind of interesting that like you guys are you're never seen without your husbands, and she's never seen with her husband.
It's
I think she remarries by 5.
It's like she has a more important role in her community than her husband does, which is really, really interesting for that time period in particular.
Well, alewives in particular, which is what Mistress Quickly is, she owns a tavern, were essentially the real businesswomen of that time. And in another video closer to Halloween, you can most of the modern iconography for witches come from alewives. They wore pointy hats so people could see them in market. They would hang a sprig of hops, which looked like a broom, up over the door when beer was ready. So you had to climb up on the building to do that. So like that's where you would like think you would see a woman like flying on a broom because she had to climb on top of it. They always had cats to chase the mice out of the rain. And which is kind of became a thing because the church was like, hey, we can't have these uppity women running their businesses and making all their own money. So alewives became witches.
Interesting.
So alewives are really the only kind of women in that time before, in the mid to late 1600s when brewing became illegal for women because it was the only female-dominated industry. They don't need men for anything.
Yeah. And she kind of like, I mean, your character too, like you get into falsetto a lot.
Yeah, but when the prince comes in, I'm like, oh, okay, like it's time to be good and be nice. But it's kind of weird how like I kind of switch, and I know that it's better off to not be aggressive talking to the prince because I don't want to say know my place because that's not right at all. But like I kind of just know when to be respectful, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have any moments where you like, oh, this is a weird statement because there's something going on stage with you in that, like distinctly feel like the woman in the scene or the odd one out? Because there's a couple lines where they'll be like, oh, you're a woman, or like they'll immediately blame you for something if something goes wrong. So I don't know if like from your point of view, if there are any times where you're like,
Yeah, well, just my whole confrontation with Falstaff and like the scene where we're like yelling at each other. I mean, it's just me, Falstaff, and Bardolph. And Bardolph's kind of like, okay, I don't want any part of this. So I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I don't have anyone to back me up. At least he kind of has you. So I have to like I mirror him and like I put my hands on my hips and I'm kind of like, okay, I have to be my like backup. So I have to
Have your own back.
Yeah. That's why I call him.
So basically, as you brought up, there are moments where a lot of the male characters in this play are like, oh, you're just a woman. For the women here who have to say things like that, how is that weird meta moment for you?
It's weird.
It's really weird, especially because Maggie and I are on stage for that point. It's it's kind of awkward because they just point it out constantly that you are the only woman on stage, but then there are 2 other women on stage who are playing male characters.
Is it actually like majority women on stage at that moment?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
at that point it's like,
It's 3-2.
Yeah, it's really weird. And like I'm standing right beside her when he just like, well, you're a woman, and like as an insult, like he's throwing it in her face that, well, you're just a woman, and I'm like, oh my god, that's the worst insult ever. But I was so sweet. I'm like a dude, so I'm like, haha, yeah. It's really weird. It's really weird. It's really weird because I can like. Obviously, well, she plays her character super awesome and like super sassy, so she gets like real mad, obviously, and I want to be like, yeah, you go, girl, but I'm like I just laugh awkwardly in the background.
You're wrong because you're a woman, but I'm also a woman. I want to empower you, but I can't.
I'm just here in the background. It's weird.
Just awkwardly wink at someone.
Yeah.
I know what I am.
Do you find it oddly liberating, though, in a weird way, to play like the guy who just walks in and does whatever? And is
Oh yeah.
Some of you have lines where you get to mansplain things to the women. How does that?
Yeah, I don't think it's. I don't know. I feel like I don't really feel that held back personally as a woman, like in my daily life. But I mean, I'm a student right now, so I haven't gone in work field, and I don't really know. I mean, I've had my moments where I feel like I've been looked down on, but I don't like feel, oh yay, I'm a guy, I get to be like, you know, like nothing's held against me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you are because I'm in my last year of high school, but in a few years I will be moving into that predominantly male world. So I feel like right now I don't appreciate it as much, but then later I'm going to look back and say, yeah, I get why now. I understand.
I think it's just fun because, well, I mean, I have felt the like pressure of living in, like you said, like a man's world and like trying to be authoritative and, you know, but I feel like too, I get to not wear a corset. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
And like my just stretchy pants that like it does not matter what's going on under.
The costumes are good.
Yeah, baggy pants.
Yeah, and like not layers of like crinoline, and I'm like, ooh, baby. We were like, wear this cape for Northumberland, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can. It's a lot of fabric. But like it's like earlier, I was like, couldn't get to the bathroom with all of these skirts, and you can't put on your own shoes. Yeah.
No, that's like the first time you put on that Mistress Quickly costume. It just
Oh my
kept
gosh.
going.
It doesn't end.
At least 5 layers, maybe.
So
And I
much.
like my pants, my shirt, and
So nice.
The one perk, I get to man spread.
Hey guys! All of us here have like our legs together or crossed, and then
oh, I know. I'm like,
I take up one person. You're
Yeah, I'll be in school and I'll be like, hey. I never wear dresses or skirts. I only wear like jeans.
Yeah.
So like, I never like.
yeah.
well, and like when you like sit like a lady, you like kind of try to suck it in, you know. And you like, sit a certain way, and like it's going off. I'm like, what's up?
I make a point in the tavern scene especially to lean forward on my knees.
I know. I'm like, I never do this as like a normal
It
girl.
feels really weird, but it's
I know. I'm like spread out on the whole bench.
let me sit there this entire because they can do that, but we can't. Well, guess who's doing it now?
I mean, if you're playing a man, you gotta.
And it's just funny because like Hui is the only guy in the background at the time, and so I'm
there's a lot of women on stage playing men, and there's a woman, and then there are also scenes where, Irene, you're the only woman on stage, but it's because you're playing a man. So in a scene of all men as the lone woman who is technically a man, how do you find?
I find sometimes, because I have to be pretty much one of the stronger males on the stage, you know, because at points I'm manipulating everything that's going on, I find I have to over-emphasize my masculine qualities.
Mm-hmm.
How does that scene shift for you? Because we have the scene where we come in as the wives. How does that shift for you when all of a sudden there are women on stage being women?
Honestly, right now I struggle with that because I find I slip more back into my feminine ways when you two are on stage with me.
Yeah.
And so I'm still struggling with finding the masculinity while you guys are on stage with me.
Yeah. Maybe it'll help more to be getting costumes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's great because in that scene, that might be the only scene where we have an even amount of men and women on stage.
Even though
But-
character-wise we don't.
Yeah, character-wise, it's like 4 to 2.
Yeah. Weird stuff.
Thanks, Shakespeare.
Think of all the poor young boys forced to wear corsets.
Oh,
when it was illegal for women to be on the
Look
stage.
who's suffering now.
We
We have to wear them. How many centuries did women wear corsets?
Oh, that's
Until
still
the
what
early
happens.
1900s. Well, yeah, but now it's by choice.
Right.
True.
But
Theater job.
Yeah. The designer hands you one, you say, yes, thank you. How tight would you like me to wear it? So in closing, does anybody have anything?
Well. I have taken over a position as executive director from a man. So I feel like I am seeing how being, I try to be authoritative but not come off as a witch. So there's that fine line. So I think it's interesting just to sit with you guys and chat because there's so many, we could when we were sitting down talking about how long do we have? Just talk. We could talk for a really long time. So I just think it's interesting just open up the dialogue of what it's like and just, experience being a woman in a play, whether you're playing a female, whether you're playing a man, it's, you get to just embrace being a female presence, even though, we're being men too. But yeah, I just think it's interesting and it's a cool topic.
girl power.
I'm excited to see, since we're doing part 1 and part 2, and a lot of these characters continue on, I'm excited to see in a few months where we stand, if these characters become more or less masculine as we spend more time with them, and then how some of these characters alter as we lose people at the end of part 1.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how these women and then men played by women are different when everyone comes to see us in November.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
But for now, part 1.
Yeah.
And then just one other shout out to just Shakespeare theaters in general. They're very welcoming to women playing men's roles, which you don't get in any other theater. And Shakespeare always seems to be accessible to everyone. People just accept. So
Yeah. And there are sometimes a couple roles, but you're probably should be a man, or probably should be a woman, but the rest are all, it's very gender casting, which is fantastic.
And it's not necessarily switching, and sometimes in productions they'll switch the gender of the character, but more often than not it's just a woman playing a man's role or a man
I
playing
feel
a
like
man's role.
this could be a springboard for other productions and other theaters for having women play male roles because for so long men played women.
Yeah.
So maybe because Shakespeare is starting to accept everyone, it has for many years now, but maybe because of it in the future, it will switch over and
Yeah. Gender is a construct, so there's nothing that makes a character
Especially
inherently.
in these plays, because if all the characters were technically, even though they were man or woman, they were all played by the same gender. At the end of the day, it's they were all written for literally anybody, because you were never going to be who you were anyway.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad that there's some shows that aren't Shakespeare that there's this character that would be really fun to play, and it's a guy, and you know that if you audition, you're not gonna.
it's just not gonna happen.
But you get the chance in Shakespeare. Which is good because there's like over 2,000 roles in the canon, and I think of those 2,000, I think less than 300 are female. So we kind of gotta play men. And we do so well.
It's also kind of funny how like it used to be like all men theater, and now like I feel like guys are it's majority of women because I feel like guys are like scared to get into theater.
Get in touch with your feelings.
Man up.
Man up.
And just like
And on that note, come see Henry Ford Part 1. Tickets are available on the website at OrangeMite.org. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And subscribe. There's probably a little button right there, or is it?
Somewhere.
You will find it somewhere.
You know
It's
where it is by now.
It's fine.
But yeah, come get involved. Come out and see us. Thank you for watching.
Bye.